As with the Central Powers, the Allied powers have a deck management game to play, and 12 of the 14 mobilization cards can be played as events to be exiled from the game. Unlike the Central Powers, there are 6 reinforcement event cards, and a maximum of 3 of these cards can be played as events on turn 2. In addition, the Allied powers have important strategic reasons to reach limited war at the end of turn 2, even at the cost of foregoing the replacement and/or operations value of the 4-Ops Blockade and Rape of Belgium events. The Allied powers should be able to play 7 or 8 cards as events in the first 2 turns. These are Blockade, Rape of Belgium, Cleave, Withdrawal, Moltke, 2 to 3 reinforcements, and possibly Entrench. The remaining cards will be shuffled in with the 20 limited war cards. The 3 operational goals that the Allied powers have during mobilization are 1. Keep the Serbs in the war. Don't allow Belgrade to fall without a fight. If the Austrians overrun the Serbs in the first 2 turns, they will be able to redeploy their armies along the Italian frontier, ready to pounce on the depleted Italian armies. 2. Keep the BEF alive long enough for the British reinforcements to arrive. At this point you may be wondering how an empire in which the sun never set could manage to deploy only one army on the onset of hostilities. The French certainly did. The British had thought it was their age, especially those in the financial sector. But the Bank of England, which had been instrumental in the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, was simply not up to the task of waging an industrial war. And a competent successor, born of a schizophrenic tryst, was still cutting its teeth on a gold standard. This is also why the first 2 British reinforcement events also provide 1 war status point each, as British society ditches their 19th century views of warfare. The third operational goal for the Allied powers is to bog the Central powers into unproductive operations on the Eastern Front, disrupting your opponent's deck management strategy. Assuming that the Guns of August is played on the first action round, the Allied powers see the start of a debacle on the Western Front, but ample opportunities to give the Austrians a thrashing on the Eastern Front. At this point, it is vital to re-examine the 3 operational goals. It is more important to give the Serbs a fighting chance than to initiate a highly chaotic Warsaw Waltz. If the entrench event is available, play it to entrench the Serbs in Belgrade. As long as the Serbs control Belgrade, the Austrians will have to devote 2 armies and a corps to contain them. An entrenchment in Skopje might keep the Serbs alive longer, but less useful to the Allied cause. If entrench is not available, play a 3 or 4 ops card too. 1. Destroy the Austrian corps in Temesvar. 2. Move the Belgian army from Antwerp to Brussels or Ostend. 3. Move the 4th Russian army from Ivangorod to Lutsk. And 4. Use the Russian 8th Army to destroy the Austrian corps in Czernowitz. On both of these attacks, do not advance after combat. Once the Austrian corps in Temesvar has been eliminated, perform an SR action, deploying a Serbian corps to Belgrade, a Russian corps to Warsaw, and a British-French corps on the Western Front. The deployment of a 4-movement Serbian corps represents a true emergency to the Central Powers if Temesvar is unoccupied, as the Serbian corps can cut supplies to the Austrian 5th and 6th armies. The Russian corps is sent to Warsaw to keep the Germans from besieging the Polish interior. Make them work for it once they get to limited war. The presence of several reinforcement event cards in the Allied player's hand on turn 1 presents a minor dilemma. While this does allow for a heavy dose of operations, the Central Powers have a substantial replacement advantage because the British have no armies that can take replacements. On the Eastern Front, the Russians receive plenty of replacements, but the true cost lies in redeploying the armies from their supply boxes to the front. The other turn 1 dilemma for the Allied powers is the dreaded mandatory offensive, especially for the British. Remember your operational goals. Entrench Belgrade first if you can, then stack the Belgian army with a BEF. If you have the Moltke event, feel free to attack the German army and follow up with the Field Marshal's nervous breakdown. While the BEF will most likely be reduced to a core, any meaningful German response will be costly in operations points. Russian activity could tempt your opponent to disrupt her deck management strategy to contain a problem in the east while exploiting a fleeting opportunity in the west. And the Serbs live another day. Turn 2 allows play of one reinforcement event for each nationality. It is very important for the allied player to play as many reinforcement events as possible. The reshuffling and expansion of the deck once limited war is reached means that unplayed mobilization reinforcement event cards may not be seen again for several turns. Time's never cheap, for the Russians are open to falling from grace. And so begins the Entente's quandary, with the Russians the only power that can reliably take heavy losses. Next episode will detail replacement and strategic redeployment strategies for both sides.